Welcome to Module 4, Lesson 2. In the last lesson, you learned all about the role of your logo in your brand system and about some logo file types and their uses. In this lesson, we'll cover key design considerations, including fonts and the basics of logo colors. A quick note on color. The upcoming module will be all about color, so if you're looking for color psychology information, stay tuned for that. In this module, we will be talking about color as it relates to logo use cases. Your logo needs to work in a wide variety of applications. It has a big job to do, and it needs to look great and be readable no matter where it's used. That's why it's so important to think about readability during the design phase. It's easy to fall in love with a design that fits your personal style, but sometimes those designs don't work as well in all of the places your logo needs to shine. For ultimate flexibility and successful branding, your logo needs to work for large formats like building signage, billboards, and trade show graphics, as well as teeny tiny applications like social media avatars and favicons. Font selections have an enormous impact on how well your logo will work in all these contexts. Clean, strong fonts perform much better in logos than fonts with embellishments. For example, here is a photo I took at a busy intersection. There's a stoplight here, and every day there are probably tens of thousands of people sitting here for a few minutes waiting for the light to turn green. It's a great marketing opportunity. What I want you to look at in this photo is the logo on the white building and the Chase Bank logo. The Chase Bank logo is much easier to read. Now, it's true that from the vantage point, the Chase Bank building is a little closer. So let's take a look at these logos side by side. You can see from this comparison that even at a slightly smaller size, the Chase Bank logo is easier to read. Now let's go back to the photos. This is an ideal location for this Pilates studio, and the logo on the side of the building could serve as fantastic free advertising. However, as you can see from the photo, the name of the studio is hard to read. The font used for the word Pilates works fairly well. It's clear and easy to read from the intersection. You're going to have to trust me on this since I know my photo isn't ideal. Unfortunately, for this business, the first word in the studio name is nearly impossible to read due to the font selection. Readability at a distance, as well as in small formats, is essential for a logo to do its job. It might seem counterintuitive, but the principles that allow a logo to work in a large format at a distance are the same principles that enable it to work in a very small format, such as a favicon or your podcast graphics. The LinkedIn logo is a good example of a logo that scales down really well. As you can see in these various sizes on your screen, it remains readable even at a pretty small size. When I tell you that you need a strong, clean font, I don't want you to think you're stuck with using a sans serif font, which was what you have seen in the past two examples. Now, I know I just dropped some design technical language on you, so let's explore what those mean. A serif font is a font that includes small decorative lines or serifs at the ends of the letters or characters. In design school, we were taught to think of these little lines on the bottom as feet. These little feet give serif fonts their classic and traditional look. Another common characteristic of serif fonts is that the thickness of the lines used in the letter forms will vary. A sans serif font is the opposite. It does not have little feet at the ends of the letters. The word sans comes from French, meaning without. So a sans serif font is without serifs or without feet. Sans serif fonts are clean and modern in appearance and have an even stroke width. In other words, the lines of the letter forms are one consistent width. A script font is a typeface designed to mimic the fluid cursive style of handwriting. These fonts are often decorative and are used to convey elegance, creativity, or a personal touch. These are highly stylized and they can be hard to read, so choose a script font carefully. A display font is a typeface designed for headlines, logos, or large-scale text, prioritizing visual impact over readability. You would never use a display font for a paragraph of text, unlike your serif and sans serif fonts, which you could use for a paragraph of text. Display fonts are often bold, decorative, and highly stylized to grab attention. Now let's take a look at a few examples of each type of font that could still work well in a logo because they have strong, clean lines. A few examples of serif fonts that could work well in a logo are Libra Baskerville, Trajan Pro, or Adobe Aldine. Here is an example of a logo that I created using a serif font. Some examples of sans serif typefaces for logos are Gamay, Elza, DM Sans, or Manup. But there are many, many sans serif fonts that you could use for a logo. So these are just some ideas to get you started. And here's an example of a logo that I created with a sans serif font. Script fonts that will work well in a logo can be difficult to find, as you saw in the Pilates sign example a minute ago. Here are some good options: Pacifico, Thirsty Script, Ballantyne's, Sign Painter, or Eldwin. As you can see, the script fonts can be very different and create completely different moods depending on the typeface design. When I select a script font, I generally look for one that has letter shapes that are easy to identify to enhance readability. As we saw with the Pilates logo, it can sometimes be hard to interpret script letter forms. Here's an example of a logo that I created with Ballantyne's script. Finally, the display fonts. We have Ono Softy, RL Aqua, Gigante, and Marhe. Display fonts vary widely. The styles can be used for creating a specific mood in graphic design or in a logo. As with script fonts, look for ones that have letter shapes that are easy to identify to enhance readability. In addition to having a main logo design, it's also good practice to have an abbreviated form or an icon that can be used in social media and in other very small placements. As you can see on these social posts, the favicon is displayed at a very, very small size. The simpler the mark, the easier it is to distinguish it at a small size. These are some icons from famous brands that scale down very well. When you design with readability and versatility in mind, your logo becomes more than a graphic. It becomes a powerful symbol for your brand. Moving on to color. As I mentioned earlier, the next module will be all about color. So for now, we're just going to focus on the different color types that you need for your logo in order to have it work in all of your use cases. To support your marketing and branding efforts, you'll need a version of your logo designed for digital use utilizing RGB color, a print-ready version in CMYK color, a black version, and a white version. Some companies may also want a version that uses the Pantone matching system, also known as PMS color. RGB color refers to red, green, and blue. RGB is designed for screens such as computers, phones, and TVs. In this format, colors are created by combining light. We'll talk about this more in detail in the next module. CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, the four primary ink colors used in printing. Printers blend these inks in various proportions to create the full range of colors required for any printed design. It's important to have both RGB and CMYK versions of your logo because using the wrong format can cause color issues. If you print an RGB file, the colors may appear dull or inaccurate. Similarly, displaying a CMYK file on your screen can make the colors look flat or even distort them in bizarre and unexpected ways. It's also standard practice to have a white version and a black version. These are used in places where the background is too similar to the color of your logo for your logo to stand out. Or in the case of the black version, maybe you need to print something in black and white, like an old newspaper ad. Let's take a quick look at the Starbucks brand website again to see this in practice. They have their standard colored word mark and a white version for dark backgrounds. Logos that use PMS color or Pantone color are designed to let printers know that a specific ink is required. This can only be done on a professional printing press, and the additional Pantone inks will increase the cost of printing a little bit. Specifying a Pantone color is the only way to get an exact match every time, and it's also the only way to include a metallic ink in your logo. The context of your logo usage is also an important factor to consider in your color decisions. If you know you will need to use it in a specific environment frequently, take the other colors in that environment into consideration. I have a quick story for you to illustrate what I mean. In my very first creative director job, I was working with an internal client on a new logo for a new division. Our team had put together a variety of options that we thought would support the overall branding, but our internal client insisted on blue. Being a new creative director, I thought, okay, let's just make him happy and we'll make it blue. So we put together everything, all of his branding. And the first event he went to, he came back and said, we have to change the color of the logo. It turns out the place where they held a lot of events had blue signage everywhere, and his logo didn't stand out with all of the other blue. That's how I learned the importance of context when considering your logo colors. I know all this information about color formats might feel overly technical or even a bit overwhelming right now. You're not alone in thinking that. Understanding RGB, CMYK, and PMS can be confusing at first, especially if you're new to design and branding. But don't worry, we'll take a much closer look at all of this in Module 5. I'll break everything down with some helpful resources to make it clearer and more manageable, so you'll feel confident using the right colors for the right situations. And that's it for this lesson and this module. I'll see you in the next module.